After their parents' death, orphans Ethan and Lana faced a ruthless sheriff who tried to take the last thing they had left, their land. Sheriff Jed Cross, hiding behind the law, used his position to leave the children homeless, which caused widespread outrage. But no one knew that the lone gunman Cole Jackson, called upon for help, saw something much greater in this case, a chance to take revenge for a past betrayal that had ruined his own life. But just listen to how shocking the twist in this drama turned out to be, and why justice, in the end, prevailed. The Fitzgerald family, once considered a beacon of hope in these harsh lands, was now just a ghost. Young Ethan and his younger sister, Lana, lived in the old barn that had miraculously survived the fire. The house their parents had built with such love stood opposite, charred and empty, a monument to their pain and loss. The land, overgrown with weeds, was a silent witness to their despair. After their parents' death, the ranch became a prize for the sheriff, Jed Cross, a man whose greed was as limitless as the prairie itself. Using loopholes in the law about unpaid taxes, he was slowly but surely taking away everything they had. Ethan, barely 14, tried to be strong for his sister, but fear was in his eyes and helplessness in his soul. He had no one to protect them, no one, except for a name he had heard in stories, the name of Cole Jackson, a lone gunman who had once fought for what was right but had vanished, leaving only legends behind. Gathering their courage, the children went to town. The town saloon, full of dust and noise, was a strange and frightening world for them. There, in a far corner, sat a man who, they thought, looked nothing like a hero. Cole Jackson was no longer young. His face was etched with wrinkles, and his eyes held weariness and cynicism. He was a ghost of the past, who had long ago stopped believing in good. Ethan, trembling with fear, walked up to him. Lana held onto his hand as if it were a lifeline. Gathering all his courage, Ethan said, "They took our land, sir. We heard you fight for the weak." These words, spoken in an innocent child's voice, pierced Cole. In their eyes, he saw not only despair, but also his own old wound. He wanted to brush them away, like bothersome flies, but he couldn't. He knew that if he turned away, he would be turning away from himself, from the man he once was. Without a word, he simply nodded, agreeing to help, because in their plea, he saw his only chance for redemption. The protector they found turned out not to be the hero of the legends. Cole Jackson moved about the ranch with the same cold and indifferent detachment with which he claimed his weapon. He mended the broken fence without speaking. His presence did not instill warmth or confidence. Rather, it felt like a constant, cold shadow hanging over their already bleak lives. Lana was afraid of him, hiding behind her brother, and Ethan, who had expected to see a noble warrior, saw only a tired man, as if carved from stone. In his heart, despair began to grow. What if they had been wrong? What if their last hope was as empty as their burnt house? Their fears were confirmed when Sheriff Jed Cross, annoyed by Cole's presence, sent his men, led by a cruel deputy. They came not to fight, but to intimidate, shouting threats and destroying everything in their path. But before they could even get off their horses, Cole stepped out to face them. He didn't draw his pistol. He didn't shout. He simply looked at them. And in his eyes was so much coldness and menace that the bandits frowned. In a matter of seconds, he disarmed two of them without a single wasted motion. There was no fury in his actions, only a terrifying, animalistic precision. The gang leader, tossing a thread in his direction, ordered his men to retreat. When everything was quiet, Ethan looked at Cole. The boy felt no admiration. There was only confusion in his soul. He said quietly, "You do it as if it costs you nothing, but you're not protecting us. You're just fighting." These words were the truth. Cole just looked away, unable to show that his despair was as deep as the children's. The tension on the ranch lingered like a heavy smog. Cole Jackson remained silent, but there were subtle changes in his behavior. He no longer sat alone by the fire, but shared simple, valuable skills with Ethan and Lana. How to properly sharpen a knife, how to find clean water in dry creeks. The children, in turn, began to see in him not just a formidable shadow, but a man who seemed to be thawing. One day, while looking through the old documents that Sheriff Jed Cross had left as proof of their debts, Cole stopped. He saw a familiar handwriting. a signature he hadn't seen in many years but had never forgotten. It was the handwriting of Jed Cross when he was still a deputy in another town. Suddenly, scenes from the past flashed before Cole's eyes as if they were real. He remembered how Cross, his partner at the time, had betrayed him. That blow had not only destroyed his reputation but also his family, forcing him to run from himself. This was his revelation. He understood that Ethan and Lana were not just in need of protection. Their misfortune was a direct consequence of the very same treacherous nature that had once destroyed Cole's life. He realized their story was his story. His fight for them was his chance to atone for the past, to finish what he had once failed to. He looked at the children, and this time, his eyes were not full of pain, but of determination. He opened up for the first time, explaining to Elizabeth that Cross was the very man who had ruined his life. Their bond became deeper, based on a shared understanding. In the eyes of Elizabeth, Ethan, and Lana, he saw a new, genuine hope, and he understood that he was now fighting not only for them but for himself, for a future he never thought he would have. The final battle was scheduled not in the dusty streets but in the courtroom, where Jed Cross, confident in his power, was preparing to officially seize the ranch. Cole Jackson went there not as a gunman, but as a witness. He knew that a bare revolver would not restore justice. He had to dismantle Cross's power by exposing his corruption. Ethan and Lana stood beside him, holding hands. Their hope was their only shield. Cole presented the old documents that Cross had used against them and showed evidence of his past schemes. In that moment, he told the whole story of the betrayal that had destroyed his life. A shock ran through the faces of those assembled. When Cross tried to leave, he was stopped not by a gun but by the law, which had finally begun to work. He was arrested, and the ranch was officially returned to the children. For Cole, a moment of silence fell when the battle was over. He could have simply left, returning to the lonely life he was used to. But when he was about to saddle his horse, Ethan walked up to him. "Will you stay, Cole?" the boy asked, and in his eyes was no longer a plea, but a quiet certainty. Lana ran up and hugged his leg. Cole, who had spent his whole life running from touch and intimacy, frowned. He looked at them, and then at the ranch that was their home. This place was now his home too. He dismounted from his horse. Finally, he was not running. He stayed. In his soul, where there had once been only pain, reconciliation reigned with the past, with himself, and with this world. He had found not just atonement, but a family that allowed him to feel like a human being again.